Rawan Osman, such a great honor for us that we could welcome you in our studio. The last year you were at the synagogue in Budapest and sharing your story. And now our listeners can enjoy that also. One of your overwhelming journey of how you became one of the biggest supporters of Israel and the Judaism. So thank you that you're being here.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
My first question is, would you please, for those who don't know your background, could you briefly share how you became a Zionist as an Arab and what's your mission? What is your mission right now?
Of course. So, for those who don't know me, because I post on social media mostly in English and sometimes I provide Arabic subtitles, I'm half Syrian, half Lebanese. My father is Sunni from Damascus. My mom is Shia from the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. And I grew up in the Bekaa Valley, which is the stronghold of Hezbollah. And I attended a French Catholic school. So that tells you that my family is secular, that religion was irrelevant in my upbringing. Otherwise, my Sunni father would not marry my Shiite mother. They would not send us to a Catholic school. So growing up, we had a Christmas tree because my father thought it's the sweetest thing you do for a child. So it was more cultural. And we belonged into the largest group of Lebanese society that was tolerant, European minded. However, the only thing that everybody in my upbringing hated, when I say everybody, I mean those who belonged in my small circle, my parents and teachers and the politicians we see on TV, the journalists who write in the newspapers, everybody agreed on their hatred of the Jews, the Zionists, and the Israelis. And these three terms are used interchangeably in most of the Arab world. You do not make a distinction between a Jew who lives peacefully in Australia and someone who lives in Judea and Samaria. So the animosity was against the Jews. I was one of those people. And growing up, I liked Hezbollah because they were the only ones who dared attack the Israelis. And why would I like that? Because Israel occupied South Lebanon. I did not know why. I didn't know that after more than 1 decade of restraint, Israel had to create a buffer zone. Because Yasser Arafat and his gangsters, by that I'm describing Palestinian factions, armed factions, militias, who trained and often were joined by radical leftists from Germany, from Japan. They trained and occasionally sent men and women to target Israeli civilians. They would infiltrate the border by land or even by sea and kill innocent people. For example, put a bomb on a bus. So suicide bombers and also assassinations took place in Europe and in the American continent until one day the Israelis understood that they have to create a buffer zone. They have to push the Palestinian militias out and push Hezbollah behind a specific line. Maybe you hear in the news lately that Israel until now is trying to push Hezbollah behind the Litani River. Why is that? So that the missiles are far enough not to hit land into northern Israel, killing people in the northern communities. So I grew up like that, without Jews living among us, because since Israel became a country, and after systematic intimidation against their Jewish communities, most of the Arab world drove their Jews out. So there were no Jews living among us. So we would believe whatever we're told about them. So if someone tells you it's typical for the Jews to kill women and children, you would believe it. So growing up like that, I had privilege of breaking out of this cocoon, of this bubble, when I moved to Europe to study for a year in France. And I lived, my apartment, my accommodation was in the Jewish quarter in Strasbourg, in France, near one of the biggest synagogues in Europe. And my first encounter with Jews on the very first day I arrived there resulted in a panic attack. I've never spoken to a Jew. We are forbidden by law from speaking to Israelis, even if we meet them abroad, outside the Middle East. And here I was in a grocery store, kosher store actually, but I did not know this, with 4 Jewish men dressed in black and white, long payas, big black hats. And I ran out of the store, leaving my shopping, my personal belongings, my passport, my bag. And I ran back where I lived. I did not look left and right when I crossed the street. I went up to the 3rd floor and I locked my bedroom door. When I looked at myself in the mirror, not being able to breathe, I saw how sweaty and red I was, and I was so embarrassed. I was also thinking that it was stupid what I've done because I left my stuff in the store. So now I had to return and lie to the storekeeper and tell him that I forgot my wallet, which is exactly what I've done. He was alone, the man had left. And I continued shopping as if nothing has happened. And when I went to pay, he asked me where I came from. So I thought, okay, I don't want to cause him to have a panic attack, so I'm just going to say the Middle East vaguely. And he insisted. So I shared that I'm half Syrian, half Lebanese. And he asked, how long have you lived in the neighborhood? So I told him I just arrived today. And that storekeeper knew exactly what happened earlier. He connected the dots, and I could tell from his smile that he knew that I was lying earlier. And he was pleasant, smiling, helped me with my bags. He allowed me to save face, although he knew that I was lying. And on that day, without intending to, that storekeeper converted me from an enemy to an ally. See sometimes how our smallest deeds can have a ripple effect in the universe. Because of that man, the trajectory of my life changed. I had to ask myself why I reacted that way. Because I was sharing the same space with the Jew, the enemy. Why was the Jew the enemy? So discovering how intensively brainwashed we were filled me with anger, disappointment, shame, a mixture of all that, because it is my side, our side, who were the assailants, the aggressors, the ones who caused the many, many, many wars, costing thousands, if not tens of thousands, their lives. And between 2011 when this happened, and now, I relearned the history of our region, and I developed the utmost admiration for the most admirable miracle on this planet, which is tiny, tiny, tiny Israel, that became the first Jewish state, which does not make sense against all odds. And they survived and thrived in spite of all the hatred and hostility they are surrounded with. Understanding that the Jews are normal people and that they belong in the Middle East, that they are indigenous to the land, that they have the right to exist just like everybody else, is one thing, and being a very vocal Zionist is something else. That is the result of what I watched on October 7th. And I think any normal woman, normal mother, should feel the same rage and infuriation I felt when I watched what Hamas, those who are called by many freedom fighters, what they've done to elderly, to children, and to women. So that is why today I fight, especially that coming from this Middle East, being half Syrian, half Lebanese, seeing what Hezbollah has done to the Lebanese people, to the Lebanese economy, seeing that the Syrian president, the previous one, not that the new one is better, but Assad and his father for more than 50 years killed more than 500,000 Syrians, and the world let the Syrian people down. They didn't do anything. We live in a world where Bashar al-Assad, after all he's done in Syria, obtained humanitarian asylum. So I thought if jihadists of Hamas dare do what they have done to the Israelis, who have one of the strongest armies in the world, and unlike our armies, they don't kill their own people, they defend them. And that did not deter jihadists. I was thinking, just imagine what jihadists will do to us in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq. Like you see what Taliban is doing to the Afghani women and little girls. Who cares? Who's willing to help? I don't talk about Afghanistan, I talk about our region, because this is where I came from, and I owe it to our people. But those who have no voices, where are the international institutions? So here is my very, very long answer to your simple question, which is not that simple.
And how do you see, from a historical perspective, how long has antisemitism been present within Muslim societies and Arab culture? Were there periods in history where Jews and Muslims lived together peacefully? And if so, what made that possible?
Okay, this is how I'm going to answer your question. Upon October 7th, Guterres of the UN said October 7th did not happen in a vacuum. He said it to justify or to help people understand what led to October 7th, what pushed Hamas to do what they've done, because he sympathizes with Palestinian armed factions. I agree with him that October 7th did not happen in a vacuum, not because I think what Hamas has done is justifiable, but because it did not happen in a vacuum indeed. Long before Israel became a country, back in the 1920s, there is an evil character. He was very clever. He's called Haj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. Back in the 20s, when he learned about the Zionist project, he understood, because he's clever, that if the struggle between the Arabs of Palestine and the Jews of Palestine is a political one, it will be resolved, and the Zionists, or the Jews of Palestine, will most likely win because they are more organized and they do not tend to kill each other, unlike the Arabs, who were fractured and could not make their mind up. So he realized that if he turned this conflict, this war, into a holy war, it cannot end before the elimination of one of the two sides. He makes it eternal because it's projecting till the end of days. It is something that will not be settled in this life until all Muslims kill all, until the Muslims kill all Jews. And if someone thinks I'm being melodramatic, I do invite you to read Hamas's charter online. It is available, the original one, 1988, not the one updated in 2017. That was a joke. It's a farce designed to fool the useful idiots of our West, and it does not negate the original charter. Please do read what they're telling you they will do to the Jews, all Jews. Under the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Empire's rule, which lasted in our region, the Levant, this part of the Middle East, more than 500 to 600 years, the Temple Mount site where Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock are was neglected by the Muslim authorities, to the point where clever Hajj Amin al-Husseini, let's call him the Grand Mufti because that's easier to remember, especially for those who'd like to read about him. I recommend a book by Tzvi al-Peleg. Please do read his book and you'll discover how interesting this chap, the Grand Mufti, is. He sent Muslim emissaries around the globe to Muslim communities to collect donations to renovate the site. And the cherry on top was when they poured gold over the Dome of the Rock. So they renovated the site, they revived its relevance. It is not evidently relevant, though, but they pushed this narrative, this story, telling every Muslim, especially if you're devout, this is a holy place, you have to claim it back, you owe it to your God, it's your holy duty. Now that is not really true. The claim that Al-Aqsa Mosque is very important and central because supposedly Prophet Muhammad of Islam traveled to heavens, to paradise, on a winged horse/creature. From that particular point where they built the mosque, cannot be proven. Also, Al-Aqsa in Arabic literally means the farthest. So the Quran mentions the farthest mosque. And from there, Prophet Muhammad had his journey. First of all, Muslim scholars cannot agree if Prophet Muhammad had the journey while dreaming or physically. I tend to think he had it while dreaming. Also, there is no historical or archaeological proof that Prophet Muhammad was ever there, or no archaeological proof that this Al-Aqsa Mosque was ever visited, this area, by the Prophet. Many Muslim scholars claim that Al-Aqsa Mosque, the farthest mosque, belongs or existed, was referring to a location within the Arabian Peninsula in the region where Saudi Arabia is today. So the claim does not stand. Whereas the Jews' claim to the Temple Mount is supported by abundant archaeological evidence. That is not to deny that on that Temple Mount exist layers of history up to the Mamluks period. And yes, a mosque was built there. And yes, the Dome of the Rock is a Muslim shrine, and it's a beautiful shrine. We don't deny facts, but to even change the name of the Western Wall and say that this is the Buraq Wall, referring to the winged animal that took Muhammad on that journey to heavens, is a little OTT, in my humble opinion. Anyone who has the chance to visit Jerusalem is invited to take a tour, the tunnel tour, under the plaza near the Western Wall, to observe the layers of history, to see that the Jewish claim cannot be denied, which means the Jews have the right, every right, to be able to worship there. They do not deny that right to Christians and Muslims, something I've seen with my own eyes after visiting Israel 16 times since October 7th. So that is the modern problem. But to your other part of the question, when you said, were there periods in history where the Jews and the Muslims got along? Yes and no. Before the end of his term, Joe Biden left a book fair carrying a book called The 100-Year War on Palestine by a historian called Rashid Khalidi. The Khalidi family is from Jerusalem. And Rashid Khalidi is a serious professor who teaches at Columbia University, one of the best universities of this world. And as a serious historian, he wrote this book after October 7th, claiming in the introduction that the Jews have always lived peacefully and well under Muslim rule. Now, if a journalist made the claim, you'd say, okay, but as an expert, I found his book a testimony to his lack of intellectual integrity because he knows better. And he knows that even before Zionism became a thing, inviting the Jews to go back to their ancestral homeland, promised to them by God, you may not believe in God, you may not believe the Jews, but it is their story. This is what they claim. It's their story. That is why this location and nowhere else on this planet. Before Zionism became a thing, the Jews and the Christians were treated sometimes well and sometimes badly. And they got the privileges from the Muslims because they are the people of the book, which means they have a book. They are also monotheistic. Therefore, the Muslims gave them some guarantees. Let's go back to the 7th century. So Islam becomes a thing. Prophet Muhammad dies, and his companions, his followers, those early Muslims, start expanding. And it goes fast. Now let's stick to our subject. The Muslims come, besiege Jerusalem. The Christian patriarch realizes they don't stand a chance. He says to the Muslims, okay, he doesn't want bloodshed. So I will hand over the keys to the city, the keys of the city, to your caliph, who was the successor of Muhammad. If the caliph comes from Mecca to Jerusalem, no bloodshed. So the Muslims say that the caliph was really honorable and he came all the way from Mecca to Jerusalem. Mind you, nobody invited the Muslims to Jerusalem. But okay, let's give him that. He came. And the patriarch gave him the key to the city. And when it was prayer time, the patriarch invited Caliph Omar to pray inside the church. And the caliph said, no, thank you. If I do, I will set a precedent. Then the Muslims will start taking your churches. Not as if that never happened. Think of Constantinople or Hagia Sophia. But these are details. After that, Muslims claim that Omar gave his assurance to the Christians and the Jews. He permitted them to stay in the city, but now the Muslims are going to take over. That is not true. The Ahd al-Umariya, Omar's assurance, is engraved on the wall, outside wall, of Masjid Omar, the Mosque of Omar, right outside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And the text is in Arabic, and near it is the translation also engraved on the outside wall. And it says that Omar gave his assurance to the Christians, those who were allowed to stay. The Byzantines had to leave, and the Christians' responsibility was to drive the thieves out of Jerusalem. And the last sentence is, the Jews are not allowed to live in Jerusalem. Why would you not allow the Jews to live in Jerusalem, although Jerusalem is as important for the Jews as Mecca is for the Muslims? Imagine now proposing to the Muslims that we take Mecca, or somebody takes Mecca from them. Throughout history, there were good phases and bad phases for Christians and Jews. Indeed. But that happened as long as the Jews and the Christians knew their space and place in society. You follow the rules, you might not get killed. In today's Iran, the Jews were not allowed. These are official decrees. They exist in archives. This is why I said Rashid Taha, as a serious historian, you cannot not know this. The Jews were not allowed to leave their homes when it snowed or rained because they would pollute and contaminate the streets for the Muslims. Now, this is my interest. Some of those rules apply to the Christians as well. But when I talk about Israel, about Zionism, I focus on the treatment of the Jews. In Yemen, in the 1800s, Yemen was ruled by a sect called the Zaydis, extreme Shia. The Zaydis issued two decrees. One is called the Dung Gatherer Decree, and the other is the Orphans Decree. The Dung Gatherer Decree assigned a job to Jewish men. That job was to remove human feces because they did not have running water outside towns. Nobody cared, like you didn't get, as a Jewish man, a day off if you keep the Sabbath on Friday. Jewish men also had to move dead bodies outside of town and animal carcasses. Now, nobody cared if you, as a Jewish man, were the descendant of Kohanim, as a Kohen, or descending from the high priests. Jewish men are not supposed to touch dead bodies. So they had to do all this. And you can only imagine the stigma associated with this job, not having running water. So you clean the latrines, basically public toilets, and you can't shower. So it was also very difficult for them to marry Jewish women. But the Dung Gather Decree was easier than the Orphans Decree, which allowed Muslim men to take the children of Jewish men if they die. Now, the circumstances of death are one thing. But let's say that a Jewish man did indeed just die. What gives a Muslim man the right to take his children, take them, convert them, abuse them, sell them, enslave them? God knows what. The Muslims argue that they did it out of goodness, but this is not how Jewish communities perceived it. Can you imagine how a mother would have felt about it? There are many, 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 many examples to tell you, to illustrate, to demonstrate that no, the Jews were not living peacefully and happily under Muslim rule. There were periods, and it depended on the political vision, on the governor, how they treated people in general. But it's not like they were given, the Jews, privileges. The Jews strive to learn, and that is what makes them smarter, not because they're necessarily genetically smarter, but because they have to learn the Torah, study the Talmud, and the Talmud includes a lot of discussion, which harnesses or encourages critical thinking. So this is why they reach positions where they are offered good jobs, where they gain influence, so to speak. But other than that, I don't think that I don't think if their circumstances were different, they would have been able to live safely. And I say this coming from the Middle East. Now, especially this generation, or since Israel became a country, when we talk about the Middle East, we're always thinking about wars, like you all kill each other. We forget that this Middle East is the cradle of civilizations. The wheel was literally invented in that Middle East. So there were ups and downs, but today we are at a new low. And coming from that Middle East, seeing or being familiar with the stories of the so many minorities that disappeared, they were diluted to a point where they vanished. I have to say that unless the Christians had the connection with the West, with Europe especially, when Europe was the center of the world, and unless the Jews strive for excellency, I don't think many would have survived in our region.
Since you attended a Catholic school, let me ask you this question. Do you think that Catholic theology or the Christian theology can be reconciled with Islam? Here in Europe, unfortunately, there was also a history of religion-based antisemitism. And since the wave of Muslim refugees arrived, the number of anti-Semitic incidents has increased. Do you see the danger of these two forms of anti-Semitism becoming connected in this way in Europe or in the West?
This is a very clever question because it um, unpacks in very simple terms what we are witnessing on the streets, especially in the West. People ask, how can progressive liberals join arms or forces, with Islamists? This is so strange. How can you join and demonstrate together? Well, one factor is that they have a common enemy from their perspective. Some are Christian anti-Semites, some are Muslim anti-Semites. Why wouldn't they protest together against Israel? I think it's actually convenient for both. There are other factors why there is this bizarre mariage d'affaires between the extreme left, the woke, and Islamists. And there are elements of ignorance which lead to what we are witnessing nowadays. But there is definitely, I wouldn't be able to know if it's necessarily just Catholic anti-Semitism, but the church played a role. But even among evangelical, and Protestants, there were enough anti-Semites, and I'm pretty sure they survived. Many of them believe conspiracy theories and blood libels. I fear that the anti-Semitism that we imported, and I say we after living in Europe for 15 years, the anti-Semitism that we imported from, especially from the Arab and Muslim worlds, can revive and unearth old Christian anti-Semitism, especially in Europe, because it encourages it and it normalizes it. Now, you cannot draw a swastika in Germany, you would go to jail. But you can burn the Israeli flag in Europe, and people will not think that you are necessarily an anti-Semite. You are an anti-Zionist. So that fusion between Christian anti-Semitism and Muslim anti-Semitism created a new form of hatred against the Jews, and that is directed against the tiny Jewish state, against Israel. It is a dangerous trend, especially that for many decades, anti-Semitism in the Arab world was ignored, although it was the elephant in the room, especially among experts who studied anti-Semitism or Nazi Germany, who should know that Nazi Germany was defeated and Europe made a promise to itself and to the world. However, the transition of this hatred, of this ideology to the Arab world was almost left undetected, ignored. I don't know if your listeners know that many of the senior Nazi officers were offered havens in the Arab world. Many died of old age. Many offered their expertise to the governments in Libya, in Egypt, in my country, Syria, helped set up notorious apparatus, security apparatus, and that was mostly directed against the peoples of these countries. So the ideology that Europe vowed to eliminate thrives in the Arab world. And I do not know if October 7th was enough to open the eyes of experts in the West to understand that this was very dangerous and it was left undetected. I say this because we have no data coming from the Arab world. A university in Cairo, in Algiers, would not, even in Beirut, would not necessarily agree to collaborate on researching anti-Semitism in those countries, because most of the Arab world does not acknowledge that this is a problem. Israel, just remove Israel from here and everything will be fine. No, everything will not be fine. And the lesson we learned, we supposedly learned from Nazi Germany, is that such level of hatred, such blinding obsession is self-destructive. Look at the price Germany paid after they inflicted so much pain on the entire globe. 6 million Jews died, indeed, but 60 million were killed because of the Second World War. Why do we always talk about the 6 million Jews? Because they consisted 1/3 of the world's Jewry. This is how big the tragedy for the Jews was. But the world has seen that this hatred is self-destructive and it is consuming the Arab world. Instead of leaders being preoccupied with introducing reforms, with enhancing educational systems, enhancing their infrastructure, finding new ways to invest, to innovate, to enlighten their people, to pump them with the energy they need to contribute to our human civilization. Everybody's preoccupied with ways to harm the Jews and to destroy Israel.
And just to go a bit further with this, what's your view of the attempt to unite the three Abrahamic religions in Abu Dhabi? I'm thinking of the Abrahamic family house, and do you think this is what could solve the problems, and this is what we are all waiting for? Because first it seems and sounds very, very appealing, but it raises a question, at least for me, like, do these three religions truly serve the same God?
Wow. So, to the beginning of your question, which is much easier to answer, the Abraham Accords offered us an alternative vision for our region. It gave hope. Is it functional? The UAE is a very successful example. For the first time since 1400 years, a church and a synagogue were built without problems in a Muslim country. Is this concept of bringing the three religions under the same roof viable, sustainable? To me, it sounds a bit like kumbaya. It's not realistic. Can we apply it elsewhere? Knowing that the UAE has a zero tolerance policy for unrest, for violence, it's working. Also because they laid the groundwork in their society to prepare them for such openness. But can we replicate this elsewhere? Can you try and do this in Egypt and nobody will bother the Jews and the Christians? I mean, it is very nice if it was possible. But that also requires that all three worshippers compromise, because the three have very different rituals. I think you can coexist, be in the same country simultaneously, but no, you don't have the same beliefs, you don't have the same traditions, and you pray very differently, and you strive for something completely different. What I mean by that, again, to show a very sharp contrast between Judaism and Islam. Islam is invested in the afterlife. As a devout Muslim, you rise higher the more you understand that this is a material world you should renounce it, leave it, and work towards your afterlife. When you die, it is very important whether you go to hell or to paradise. And in paradise, there you can enjoy life. But now, in this life, everything is vain. Now, Judaism has a completely different approach. You serve your God when you serve your community, when you treat yourself and your people to the best of your abilities. Judaism doesn't even talk about the afterlife. The realism is something I find extremely appealing. Let alone that if you actually mention Christianity, the issue of Jesus and what is his role, whether we talk about the Trinity, whether we talk about Jesus' connection with God, that becomes very problematic for both the Jews and the Muslims. So, can we exercise this kumbaya? Can we enjoy this experiment by ignoring the elephant in the room, focusing on what we have in common, and ignoring our differences completely? Yes, it is possible. But I would rather live in a secular country where there is a strict separation between state and church, where people can practice. And you see this example in the UAE, but also in Israel. The Baha'is are not allowed to practice in any Muslim country because they are seen as whatever they do is heresy. They have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful center, the headquarters in Haifa in Israel, this Jewish genocidal state. People who claim that do not know what Israel is about. Be whoever you want to be, do whatever you want to do. And although it's a Jewish state, nobody's going to decapitate you for being homosexual or a transgender. As long as you don't force your ways on others, you don't impose your lifestyle and your worldview, we should be fine. But the very tricky part of your question is, do those three religions worship the same God? I was an atheist all my life. Growing up between Christians and Muslims, the Muslims told us that the Christians are lying, and the Christians told us that the Muslims are lying. So we concluded that both are lying. Or, in hindsight, as a child, when you have Christians and Muslims in your family, you don't want to take a side. So you don't subscribe to any of the clubs. I personally found the versions we were told about the Creator to be a bit ridiculous. And I do not mean any disrespect, but I thought a Creator that is able to create this universe cannot be a petty God who's watching you day and night. And this is what is supposed to shape your personality. He's watching you. If you do something wrong, he will burn you forever and ever. But if you're good, you go to paradise. So you're either an opportunist or you don't care and you're foolish and evil. Although you know you're going to burn in hellfire, you still commit a crime. That sounded a bit crazy for me. And later, when I went to university to study Jewish studies, and my motivation was political, I wanted to know how do we solve the Middle East problem. I realized that the versions I was exposed to did not do religion justice. People always say religion causes all evil in the world. It causes the separation. It shouldn't. It doesn't have to. It is human beings who do not know how to convey the very deep messages sometimes in religion who cause the trouble. The book doesn't do anything. It is there. It's up to you how you interpret it, how you understand it, and how you practice, and how you decide to live the book. The book is not doing anything. Judaism, to me, was very realistic. And the prophets are depicted as normal human beings. They sin. which gives us hope. Our biggest challenge is ourselves, the evil within, not the evil without. Everybody's preoccupied with saving the world, repairing the world. Even the concept of tikkun olam, like repairing the world, exists in Judaism. But your biggest challenge is fixing yourselves, fighting against our tendencies. So I think, as I am someone who's converting to Judaism, since I had a completely different understanding to what the Creator is, I do not think that there is more than one God. I think some people's understanding of what the Creator is distorted. And if you truly think as a human being that you kill for God's sake, you belong in a mental house. When and how did we reach a point where we're appeasing people who think they're doing something good while harming others? In the name of God, they claim that this is madness. I think we tolerate this nonsense because among the most extreme Islamist groups, terrorism became a common tool to intimidate. This is what instilled a lot of cowardice in the hearts of Western politicians because they don't want to be the victim of an assassination or a bomb, and they don't want to hurt their communities or their families. I think this is an ill misconception of what the Creator is and what He expects of us. Many don't believe in a God, in a Creator, and I think that's not a problem at all. You don't have to. We each have to find our own ways in life and be true to our inner self. However, we cannot deny some of the oldest wisdoms that were delivered not only through Judaism or not only through the Judeo-Christian tradition. There is a lot of wisdom even in Islam and even outside monotheistic religions. At least out of appreciation to this wisdom, we should try to implement some of this collective wisdom, I cannot find a better word, into our lives, because it's meant to help us work on ourselves, help us be better, and regulate the human interactions. Because we are not identical, we have the tendency to argue, even to fight, which normally on a macro level can lead to wars. And we need guidance, we need wisdom. So the God is the same in all three religions. Three religions that are old. If you take the book and read whichever book, the Tanakh, the New Testament, choose whichever book, the Quran, you can't really make sense out of a lot of the ideas that it conveys. You need to interpret it. And normally to interpret it, you need the help of someone who is an expert, who's qualified. And it depends on the interpretation of this expert that will form your understanding. So if the person who is your advisor or your trusted source is extreme and evil, that will affect the way you practice. And this is where we have a lot of problems in the Muslim world, because there is no centrality, there is no Vatican, so to speak, for the Muslim world. So any crazy imam can issue a fatwa and it will be followed by those who think that it makes sense.
To close our conversation, I usually ask all my guests this when we talk about antisemitism. Why do you think it keeps coming back throughout history? What do you believe this is what do you believe is the reason for that?
After October 7th, I was invited to make a documentary. It's called Tragic Awakening. You can only find the trailer on YouTube, but those 3 minutes already give a general idea. The film tackles the roots of the oldest form of hatred, antisemitism. And together with academics, experts, rabbis, we explore what are the possibilities. Why? Why can you now in 2024 see in Sydney intelligent people? They don't live in in a remote jungle, saying gas the Jews. Gas the Jews. They don't need Holocaust education. They know exactly what happened. They're telling you gas the Jews. How can this happen? Why does this hate keep morphing? And there are a lot of theories. Scapegoating, hating the Jews because supposedly they killed God. Okay, but the Vatican in the 60s absolved the Jews from that original sin. What is it? Really because the Muslims want Al-Aqsa back, from whom you don't want the Jews to live among you in the Middle East? What is it that makes the people throughout millennia hate the Jews to death? Which other people on the planet was subject to hunting? Nowadays, since October 7th, we hear many Palestinian officials accusing Israel of committing a Holocaust, a second Holocaust. Ironically, this is a side remark, ironically, the same Palestinian leaders were the biggest Holocaust deniers. Suddenly they jumped from denying the Holocaust to believing the Holocaust and accusing the Israelis of committing one against them. When has Israel ever demanded of the entire Arab world, for example, to ship their Palestinians over to them, send them to us, to Israel, and we're going to burn all of them, including their babies? When has this ever happened? How can you even compare? So what is it that makes people make such absurd statements? And we conclude in the film, in the documentary, which is almost an hour, especially that most people who answer this question are experts, but they are religious Jews. On Mount Sinai, humanity received a message, and there is a group who heard the message and accepted a mission. This mission brought the 10 Commandments to the world, the Torah, which transformed our understanding of many things. It was not the same before. In the West, cool, secular atheists enjoy their weekend. They think that it's a natural thing. No, it was introduced by Judaism, by the Torah. You give a break even to your slaves, even to your animals. Now people are going to roll their eyes. Slaves? Yeah, back in the days. The Torah regulated, it introduced a moral code. And that moral code is not something appreciated by a lot of people. What do you mean? Like, are you going to tell Muslim men, for example, that he's not allowed to even look at other women? What do you mean you're limiting me to my wife? For example, things are changing. And
És azoknak, akik nem tudják,
I forgot the word. Even Jews were allowed to marry more than one woman. And that changed. That was abolished at a certain point in history. The sheer fact that Judaism introduced a revolutionary concept, such as whoever you are as a human being, you are equal to other human beings. Pharaoh claimed he's godly. Judaism said no, not Pharaoh, not anybody. They challenged Pharaoh. Such a civilization was questioned, challenged by the miserable Jews who were enslaved, who said, no, we know better. Who are you to know better? They are the people who accepted the mission. And those who know the Torah know that the Jews suffered a lot. As someone who's converting, I do believe that that message, that mission was given by our Creator. And I believe that the mission entailed consequences. And those who claim to be the chosen people, they do not claim to be the chosen people. It's not a notion of supremacy, of superiority. They're chosen because they accepted the mission. You could have been chosen as well. But it is the miserable poor Jews who accepted the mission with the entailed consequences, and until today, they will pay the price. And the way they handle their problems is the role they play in this world. This is the inspiration, the light they bring into our world, how they handle their problems. And they should be our inspiration, especially after they established Israel, the Jewish state, especially the way they handle their problems after October 7th, which is the lowest point in history for Israel. So the hatred will keep morphing. It will never disappear because the Torah teaches us that evil is objective. Evil exists. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to wage a war. Take it on a personal level. And we have an obligation and the right for self-defense. We owe it to ourselves, to our children, if we are attacked. Evil exists. How do we combat evil? I don't know. This is not up to us. We have to all contribute our bit in order to make the world better. But we start with ourselves. And I think this is the role the Jews play in the Middle East.
Rawan Osman, thank you for this conversation. That was really, really inspiring for me. I wish you much success in your work. And I hope we will meet again, whether in Hungary or in Jerusalem. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll come back to Hungary, but please do get in touch when you come to Jerusalem.
Of course. Thank you.